Abhishek Deshpande joins me now. He is the head of energy research for NATIXIS. We look at these energy outlooks here at the International Energy Forum. How important is it for yourself, in terms of the people in the analyst community as well, looking at the collaborative work that actually has been put in place to pull these together?
I believe it's a great initiative from IEF, especially because the whole idea is to have a convergence in between the outlooks presented by the two key energy agencies over here, which are OPEC and IEA. So IEF is definitely giving a great platform to have the outlooks to be delivered and then find what are the differences and what are the remedies to reduce those differences, thereby basically bringing the baseline effects or the differences in the base effects, let's say 2015 numbers that were discussed today, to its minimum. And as an analyst, for example, for me, it's very important because it reduces the conflict of which number I need to use, IEA or OPEC, because if both of them are almost similar and have corrected their differences in terms of analysis on supply demand, then it really helps us analysts to then have a bit of confidence in the numbers to be used in our own in-house analysis.
Now, of course, there's a lot of people here who have come together for this gathering in Saudi Arabia, a lot of your colleagues too. What are some of the issues that have been discussed here throughout the day?
Well, we did have one of the biggest issues was that there is a big divergence still if you look at some of the backdated numbers from 2015 and what can really be done to reduce those gaps in order to then basically reduce the gaps in the future demand and supply forecasts. Because whatever you're seeing now is having an impact on the future demand and supply forecast. And the idea is if you cannot reduce these gaps today, then the uncertainty remains that how much of that uncertainty in terms of supply demand forecast is in place for let's say 2040 scenario right now. And I think in a market which has gone through a very volatile or tumultuous times in 2 years, it's very important to get these numbers correct now so that we reduce the volatility otherwise in place in oil markets.
Now, of course, we have the International Energy Agency here, we have OPEC and all of the research team, and again, all the people who put these together. You've been watching the markets now for several years. Really, it's been a tough few years in the last time. Do you get the feeling, though, we're coming out of that? Are you really sensing that stability, or is it just a lull for the time being?
No, I think there is a general consensus. I mean, sometimes consensus are not always good, but there is a general consensus that we are moving towards a balanced market, and the balanced market is definitely being helped over here by OPEC's decision last November in order to cut back on supply along with the non-OPEC countries. So that definitely is helping. There's a general consensus, and the numbers are obviously providing the support to that the compliance rates are high. So generally, we are moving in a more balanced market. Of course, the wild card or the black swan events will still be in place, such as the United States production. By how much does it rise? And some of those issues today were being discussed where there is not a consensus over here, where some people believe that the production may not return necessarily with a large significantly, and whereas some believe that it can return significantly.
Well, of course, it's guessing the future of the oil market has always been quite a tricky one. But again, when we look towards the months ahead, and we're seeing some strength in the economy, and we're seeing some drawdown on supply, but are you in the camp that favors perhaps an extension of the OPEC, non-OPEC agreement maybe for another 6 months, or what do you think they might need to do when they get to June? And of course, the monitoring committee watching this very carefully. We'll have those numbers soon.
Well, we did our own balances that we do in-house, and it clearly suggests that basically the markets have been raised because of the OPEC meeting last November, and that price recovery has had an impact on the US production and rigs. So if the US, in our base case scenario, will return, assuming by, let's say, 500,000 barrels per day on average this year, then that will have an impact on the overall balances, kicking the tin down the road for the overall global markets. And in taking that as a central scenario, we believe that OPEC needs to stay with the current scenario, with the current agreement with non-OPEC on cuts for another 6 months after the first one lapses in June.
But there's a general feeling that the agreement actually worked. I think we're hearing that from everybody, that we can see it play out in the market. So is the analyst community, you think, and your clients? I mean, are they feeling that actually this was a good idea to make this decision and move forward?
No, absolutely. And again, I think there was a bit of a skepticism earlier because of, first of all, them trying to agree. And once they agreed, whether we'll see the level of cuts that they were expecting because of the past compliance rates. But to be honest, on the bright side of it, the compliance has been actually spectacular. Now, the big question still remains, for how many more months will you see the same similar compliance? But for the time being, I think the confidence level in the markets is high in terms of the cutbacks that OPEC has so far provided, especially led by Saudi Arabia in this case.
Now, of course, looking at the data, looking at the numbers, very, very important for everybody in the market too. Just talk to me briefly about how Jody is impacting the information that's out there too. Do you find it useful, the Joint Organization Data Initiative? A lot of the people here, of course, at this International Energy Forum gathering as well. But do you find that detail informative and good for you?
We do use Jody in some of our analysis, especially for countries in the non-OECD part of the world, because that's where Jody is really good at providing data that is not necessarily available easily, and the participating countries have the obligation, or at least are making an effort to provide this data to Jody. So Jody is definitely helping bridge that gap between the availability of data and hence reducing, I would not say removing it completely, but reducing the uncertainty. But that said, the gap still remains, and that gap means, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, that we are still seeing the differences within the OPEC's way of calculating supply-demand, particularly demand, and IEA's way of calculating demand, and that gap will need to be bridged, which is where, again, Jody, IEF, they all need to make that collective initiative to help converge these data points.